Hi, and welcome to today's webinar. We're going to talk about help someone has registered my domain. I'm so happy to see that we have a lot of attendees, still several attendees joining. Welcome to all of you. And just a short reminder, this is an interactive webinar, so please feel free to ask any questions you have during the whole webinar. You have a question box in your screen, so just type in the questions and we will do our best to answer all of them. Our ambition is to answer all of them, but we still just have an hour to go. So we have a strategy for that, actually. We will get back to each and every one of you with the questions that if we run out of time and we can't really answer them to you. So let's go on to today's agenda. First, we will have an introduction of the panelists. After that, we will have some polls to get to know you in the audience. Then we will move on to a short introduction of DotKeeper and the domain name Aftermarket. After that, we will have a question and answer section and some key takeaways. So let's move on to the panelists. First up, we have Marcus Glad. Marcus, will you please join the stage, say hello, and tell us a bit about who you are?
Hello, everyone. Marcus, and I'm Partner and Chief Operating Officer at DotKeeper. I've been working in the domain name industry since the beginning of 2000 and joined DotKeeper as partner back in 2014. And pretty much during all my time in the domain name industry, I've been working a lot with domain name aftermarket, acquisitions, and sales of domain name. When I'm not at the DotKeeper office, or nowadays home office, I'm also with the board of registrars.se and also Internet Society, the Swedish chapter, ISOC.se. So a lot of interest in the internet and domain name community.
Wow, that's an impressive CV you have there, Marcus. I'm so glad that you are on board today, and I really look forward to hear more about the learnings that you have to share with us. So let's move on to Sten then. Please join the stage. Tell us about, say hello and tell us about who you are.
Yes, hello everyone. Nice to see some interest in the weirdness of the domain name aftermarket. I'm Sten Liljeström. I'm a journalist right now on a career shifting journey, maybe into the world of domain names. I kind of look at it as an in-depth coverage of something peculiar and exciting, because for me, there's something that just fires up the imagination with domain names. I'm a domain name investor, and I currently help DotKeeper with aftermarket acquisitions.
Wow, that is really inspiring. I must admit, I have never been like fired up the imagination with the domains, as you say, but as long as you're happy, I'm happy, Sten. All right, so last but not least, my name is Katrin Johansson. I have a background in business development. My current position is head of AVA Innovation, which is a department within AVA Group. And AVA Group is an international IP law firm. We have a presence in both Europe and Asia, and we have clients from all over the world. And a couple of years, DotKeeper was also joining the AVA Group. So we have been collaborating for several years, but now we are actually true colleagues as well. That makes me very proud, because that makes AVA a one-stop shop for intellectual property matters. And why am I here? I'm here to moderate this event. So I hope you will enjoy everything. And as I said earlier, keep on asking questions. We have had several questions coming in already. Really nice to see that you are so engaged today. So yeah. Now you know a bit about us. We will move on to the polls to get to know you guys a bit better. So please fire away the questions. The first one is, what is your background? Select one of the following. Are you from legal, business developer, academic or research, finance or investor, or an entrepreneur? This is really interesting. I haven't really seen the attendee list, so I'm really curious about to know who you guys are listening right now. Let's see. What? No answers? Can that be true? You have answers. All right. So in my screen, there are really no answers. We'll see. I have some backup here. Wow. That's great to have some wingmans on board when you do stuff like this. Wow, they have 68% within legal. That's really interesting. And you guys, you know the closeness between the trademarks and the digital brand, aka domains. So I guess that's why. Also, a lot of entrepreneurs. I like that. And some business development. Okay, let's move on to the next questions. Have you experienced that the domain name you wanted was already taken? Yes or no? Quite simple. I know I have experienced that several times, and my analysis was that well, then it's no chance. But actually today, I think we will learn that there might be a chance even though it's taken. So let's see the answers. Oh, now I also see the answers here, but I still have some proactive wingmans on board. All right, so the answer is yes, 69%. Wow, that's great. Let's move on to the next question. Have you ever bought an already registered domain name? Yes or no? I haven't done for sure, but maybe you have. I'm really looking forward to this answer. No, 62% was the majority answer, but still 38% has bought an already registered domain name. Wow, that's cool. So I think we have one question left. Let's fire it up. Are you right now interested in an already taken domain name? Yes or no? I am actually. I know this is something I will have to talk about the DotKeeper colleagues at our coffee machine, because I have some serious plans there to take over a domain name that's already taken. So let's see what answer we have. Yes or no? So about 50-50. I think that's a great start here. Now we know more about you, and that is really helping us out when answering the questions later. So before we get started, I would like to invite Marcus into the stage and shortly introduce us to DotKeeper and also a little bit about the domain aftermarket.
Yes, thank you. So the very short introduction is that we secure our clients' most important assets. In a little bit longer version is that we manage domain name portfolios for companies and help them reduce risk through automated renewals and secure DNS. We remove administration with annual invoicing for all domains worldwide, and we add strategic value through our client managers and subject matter experts like myself and Sten and others, subject matter experts within the area of domain names. So we pretty much we help our customers protect their brand online and in the best possible way. We are part now of a group, and together we help companies to take more holistic approach to the legal and digital trademarks.
That's great. Yeah, and the domain aftermarket. Can you tell us a bit about that one?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the most frequently asked question we get, both from clients and from non-clients to us, is about the domain name aftermarket. Mostly about acquiring domain names, like the ones that you had in the poll here. we receive several questions every week about taking domain names that companies want to acquire. But also sometimes you don't want to acquire the domain name. Then you can use what we call the drop catch service. Try to register domain name that are recently perhaps not renewed and going to expire and so on. But also companies want to sell domain names that they have today and perhaps don't use anymore and get offers on and so on. So it's several aspects of the aftermarket.
That's great. That's very interesting. As I mentioned earlier, I work in AVA. So at my office, I have some lawyers very close, and as you can understand, for like forever, everyone has been working with trademarks. But I really think this domain side is very interesting. Also, that you can work with it very much more when it comes to different campaigns and the branding in general. So I think it's really interesting topic here we have today. So what we will talk about here today is basically about the domain names, as you just introduced. We will also talk about the domain name aftermarket today, the examples from aftermarket and the value of a domain name, and also the domain name as IP. But first of all, I have a question for you, Marcus. Why are domain names so important?
Well, in today's digital landscape, I would say it's it's absolutely as important as a trademark. I mean, from the beginning, a domain name is just a way to that we don't need have to add a serial of numbers into our web browser. But I mean, today it's becoming more and more of straightforward brands, and protecting that kind of asset in different areas, different regions, different countries, markets, and so on, has become really, really important. And that's why also we see an increase of use of our services in the aftermarket to get hold of these kind of assets.
I can imagine so, and I've been working a lot with startup scale-ups, and from that perspective, it is, I mean, almost everyone has going global ambitions and so on. So absolutely, it's I can truly see that. And Sten, do you have anything you would elaborate on this question?
Yes, well, I think that there's maybe two sides of the answer to that question. One is that you are going to need one if you're going to do business online, unless you want to do it all on social media or offline or entirely through an app or something, which I think maybe few would recommend. The future, as they said 20 years ago, is online. But I think with the current situation right now going on with COVID, you can actually say that again without sounding stupid.
Yeah.
And number two is, I really think that the domain name is the centerpiece of the digital brand today. To have it match your brand is valuable because it limits confusion and it limits traffic bleed to the exact match domain. And it also increases credibility for the business. It creates optimization in many ways. And I think that many high-level transactions are upgrades of this kind.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And could you please tell us a little bit about the domain aftermarket today? I mean, before we started to plan this, I had never heard about the aftermarket. So I think it's really interesting, and I would like to know a bit more about how it looks like and the turnover and everything.
Yeah, so the domain name aftermarket is hard to pinpoint value-wise because not all sales are reported. In fact, few sales are reported, but kind of credible number would be around $2 billion yearly that transacts entirely on the aftermarket.
That's interesting. And so as I understand it, the aftermarket is when you buy something that's already been registered. Is that correct?
Yes, and most everything has already been registered, or at least it has been. But as with any market, there are two sides: buyers, of course, and sellers. And the buyers are businesses that can find their match available for registration. They may also have accidentally dropped a name. That is not uncommon. They may have a very good business plan for it. Buyers are also today frequently other investors, even though deals between investors are typically never, blockbuster sales. Yeah.
Do you have any numbers regarding like how many, of all registered domains, like how do you even have a fair chance to buy something? Are people holding on to them forever, or do they? I have some domains, so I get the updates like now you need to renew your domains. Do people do that all the time, or do you have an idea about?
Well, I don't have the exact numbers on this. Maybe Marcus can help. But sometimes very valuable names just cease to exist or drop from registration, and they are instantly, re-registered, and in some cases they are deemed to be so valuable that they are auctioned off. And sometimes these auction sums, they can be also quite high. Yes.
That is very interesting, because if something is a moving object, then it gives you some hope. So I think that's a good one. Actually, we have several questions coming in. I think this is so fun, so I will shoot them up. So it's one here from Anna. What is a premium domain? Marcus, will you take that one?
Yeah. So premium names. Nowadays we also see definition premium name, and then you see super premium domain names. but trying to explain a premium name is that it's an expression used to describe domain names that are supposedly significant and more valuable than others. Between, correct me if I'm wrong here, Sten, between investors, this is the essence of like 1 to 4 character domain names in one word. I can't give you which one, but we sold a premium name on behalf of a client last year, and that was a single word dictionary word that sold for $1 million. So that's a typical premium name. It's a short, like category killer domain name, and they typically go for really high amounts.
Okay, and why is it so incredibly high amounts? I think that's so weird. Sometimes it's is it always high amounts? Why is it high amounts, and is it always high amounts?
Well, high amounts are really an exception. It's an exception that domains sell on the aftermarket, and it's almost insane exception when they reach 1 million, 2 million, or 3 million. It's very rare, but it does happen, and I think that when it happens, it's almost always in the same way. It's a business that is looking to achieve maybe a multi-billion-dollar valuation down the line, and a domain that fits the bill is on the market. So it's a matter of sudden unique demand meeting sudden unique supply. It's about how deep is the buyer's pockets and how big an offer can the seller turn down. If you want some examples of recent sales, we can talk about that. We have voice.com. Maybe you've heard of this sale. It's sold to a blockchain-powered social media business for, I think it was $30 million. So that is supposedly the highest domain name sale ever.
Wow.
Another current example could be Zoom.com. This company, which is now everywhere, it acquired its .com domain about a year ago. They were previously on Zoom.us, and it's been quite a year for them. The sale was not reported, but the Zoom filings say that it could be around 2 million for that domain name.
Wow, but you say that it is rare. So for all our ordinary people, if we are looking for a domain and it looks like it's taken, what would you see be a normal thing then? If it's rare to be this incredible high amounts?
Yes, I think, yeah, you go, Marcus.
I will just take short note, but I mean, if we look on all the acquisitions we do, I would say, and that maps pretty well with what the big aftermarket places gives away in numbers as well. I would say the sweet spot in domain name acquisitions is between $1,500 to $5,000. So
yes,
there's where the most acquisition is.
Okay.
yes.
Does it happen anytime that you can actually just receive, I mean, can you ask for a domain and get it without paying? Did that happen, that someone feels like, okay, it's really you who should have the domain?
Well, if you have, if you ask, you might, but I don't think you can count on it. Someone is holding property that you would like to own or have or use, and I think to make an offer for it in the range that Marcus is speaking about, maybe $1,500, $2,000, $3,000, that could very well, yeah, start a transaction for that name.
All right. So one other question from the audience then. Eric wonders, how can you value something like this? It must be hard.
It is hard.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think you really can value, but you can have a good try. If you have like experience with IP valuations, you know that they can differ depending on who makes them. But the value for a business can be a lot bigger than anticipated, as with other IP. It's about taking the whole picture, I think, into account, since I mean, available domains have the oddity that they can be registered by anyone for, say, $10. Then a common reaction to a reseller price tag for a taken domain that is not in use is, yeah, sometimes it's that they are out of their mind. This is an insane price tag. Sometimes it is an insane price tag, and sometimes it is not.
Yeah, all right. So what kind of ways can you actually value a domain? Is there different ways? You said you talked about a holistic approach, like, but are there several methods or?
Yeah, but as Sten mentioned as well, I think the most important thing is to value from the company's perspective. What would it be worth for us having this domain name? I mean, and that's different. I mean, we often do like attempt to acquire domain names on, I would say, more of a nice to have basis more than need to have. I think that's important. I mean, and then you go, for example, what would it mean for example, like Facebook? They shifted from the Facebook to Facebook. I'm sure that they don't have problem with the money they paid for that switch. But when we look at the valuation of domain names, we look at, of course, what extension. Is it a .com domain name? If is of course more expensive to acquire than a .se domain name, mostly. We look at the age of a domain name. Older domain name with SEO index, that of course then a site that has been live an index on Google, for example, means a lot. In general, the shorter the better. As we talked about, more of the premium names. Of course, we, as in real estate, we look at similar sales. If a similar domain name's sold 2 weeks ago for a certain amount, of course that will affect the price tag on the domain name. Anything to add, Phil?
Do you have something to add, Sten, on that one?
Well, no, as I said earlier, I think it's you have to look at it through two set of eyes. I mean, from the business perspective, what is it worth for the business going forward? And also as an argument, maybe if the price tag is too high, you can look at previous sales, and you can look at what kind of brand value is inherent to the name.
All right, great. We have so many questions coming in. I love that you are so engaged in that one. That's why I'm trying to figure everything out here. I will move on to the next question here. I don't know if you've seen the promo video from this webinar, but we talked about squatters there. So there's a question about squatters. Aren't the squatters taking advantage of business? Why should anyone negotiate with them? So first tell us, what is a squatter and why should we negotiate with them?
Well, yes, there are squatters, and no, you shouldn't negotiate with them if they are squatting. The thing I think to realize about regulations around domain names is that they are centered around something that's called intent. And in arbitration proceedings, the burden of proving so-called bad faith lies with the complainant, and that and the other two requisites, which are confusingly similar and legitimate interest. There are cases where a so-called UDRP application is definitely the best route, but in I think the vast majority of cases, I don't think it's not really. I don't think that most domain name transactions could have been a successful UDRP or infringement case in the first place. Someone holding a domain that you want or need is not a squatter per se.
All right. And another question, what problem is a domain investor solving?
Well, I can only speak for myself, but I target the general demand. I follow an existing market and the existing rules. And what I think that I create is, and what my customers want, it's a simplified journey towards finding and acquiring a fair market value domain that can be the centerpiece of their brand for years to come. So I think that with or without domain investors on the market, great domain names would not be available for registration. I think that those days might be long gone. Finding and acquiring a domain name that is a match to your business, it's a hard thing to accomplish, and it's not getting easier.
All right. Thank you very much. I have a question from Marcus here. So would you call domain names IP?
Yes.
Yes, that's a short answer.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, but I mean, a clear trend we see at DotKeeper, and of course that's the reason why we are part of a group nowadays, is that companies look at domain name as a part of IP. And I would say the best dialogue we have is when domain name is included in the IP portfolio, and you involve both the legal side, the marketing side, the IT within the company, because it really affects everyone within the company.
Yeah, I think that's a really good wrap up to that question, because we can see that also from the AVA perspective, that the clients that we work with in a holistic way, working with patents, trademarks, domain, everything, that you can actually get the sense and the feel of relief when you have like all the IP like in one. You have the holistic approach, you make sure that we don't miss anything. I think that's a really good takeaway. So whoever you work with, make sure that you have all your IP portfolio covered, so that you, especially the domain names, because they have been a bit on the side for quite a long time. It's not fair. Nobody put domain names in the corner, I would say, but that actually happens sometimes.
Yes,
So,
and
Also,
I think
sorry, Sten, go ahead.
yeah, about that, I think that the earlier that you can secure a domain name, as soon as you maybe know that this domain name, I want it, I need it, the business needs it, as soon as you can acquire it and lock it down, so to speak, the less expensive it's going to be, because today there are, well, the bad faith registrants, they are watching businesses and what kind of trademarks they are registering, and acquiring domain names to sell them to them. And if you let them do that first, it's going to turn out expensive.
yeah, I can imagine. And we actually had a question regarding that from Niklas. So if you're a startup, scale up, or early stage entrepreneur, how early should you be considering naming, brand, domain strategy, and what actions can be taken? I mean, often in early stage, you don't have that much funding, but you still need to know that you're doing the right stuff in the right order. So, Marcus, do you have a good answer to that one?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is as early as possible, of course, but it's very easy to sit here and say, because, I mean, we often see that you go after a name and that it's taken and it's quite generic, and then what we would say, as we talked about earlier, premium name, and then of course it's very hard to fund that kind of name. So I would say perhaps start in the right end in terms of looking, is this really the right name for our product, for our service, for our company? Is the .com available? If not, is it possible to acquire? So I mean, perhaps we see a lot of companies and startups and so on that perhaps has nailed their name for the product and so on too early, I would say. They're very definite in this is the name we're going to go with, and then perhaps see that, oh, we got a problem, and then you're gonna start adding like get something, or you end the name with fi or yeah, something like that. And
so it is strategic, and it's better the earlier on you do it, because as we talked about earlier, I mean, the startup scale-ups often have global ambitions. So, and I know that there are several strategic advantages that you need to consider regarding different countries and stuff like that. So, as early as possible would be the answer for this one. All right.
Yeah, and just to add on to that, I mean, you often look at the .com domain name, which is of course important, but as you say, if you then get hold of like the .se but not the .com, and start to register perhaps other different country-specific extensions, you will see that other country-specific extensions get registered by bad faith actors as well. So I mean, it's really, you have to see, is this doable in the long term? Really try to look at it in a 3 or 5 year terms. I know it can be hard in the beginning, but it's really important. And we can, and other companies as well, can help you with that. So it's really important to not just sit around with a branding company or the marketing company. You should really involve both Av and Dotkeeper to see if is it possible to get this trademark and domain name.
Yes.
Yeah.
What does the market look like in the first place? And I also think that maybe, I don't know if Marcus agrees with this, but I think the best advice that I have for a business looking to acquire their name is that if you can, don't go with alternative options. Try to choose a name that you don't have to compromise with. If you plan on being successful, which I hope you are, it can be really expensive to launch and brand on a compromise. And then realize that you have to backtrack and maybe change your name, or that your traffic is going to someone else, and you really need the name that you chose not to acquire.
Yeah, and that can be really expensive to compromise. So, and I know that we are doing a lot of stuff like this, and I know that there are great advice both from Dotkeeper and Ava on this, because I actually got a question just a couple of minutes ago. It's from Tabea. In concrete steps, what is the most cost-effective way to go about getting the domain name we want, and how long does the process usually take?
Oh, there's no simple answer to that question, but get creative with your naming if you have that opportunity. If it's a startup, you have that opportunity. You can choose a name for yourself, and then you can choose a name that has the most effortless path. You can choose a name that works for you and your audience, and you can beforehand see that these are available for registration. Of course, if they are, you should register them straight away, and after that go after the rest of the IP.
All right.
Okay.
And another
to add the second part of that question, I mean, it's very much depending, but if you look at our process, it's normally a 3 to 5 weeks process from the first contact to that our client actually holds the domain name and the legal ownership is changed and so on, because it's just, it's not just picking up the domain name. You have to do all these boring administrative things as well, like changing legal ownership and so on. So securing
that's your
job. Yeah.
I'm so happy that some people want to work with the boring stuff as well.
So I mean,
Stian, you shouldn't be laughing, because you said that this was very inspiring. And
yeah, well, it's hard to explain how that works, how it can be inspired by it. But it's about, I think, the opportunity within each and every domain name, unique entities that can, you can go from being nothing to launching something incredible online, and the domain name is what makes that possible. So something intriguing about it.
Yeah, and I like the thing, as I said earlier, the thing that trademark is really, it's expensive and you should really keep it simple and stuff like that. But with the domain names, you can make really fun campaigns. I love when I see an organization taking stand or making a specific campaign around something and using the domain names also to get visible. We've seen a lot around Corona and COVID-19. I think it's brilliant. All right, so another question from Rickard. What should you watch out for when negotiating the price for your domain?
Do you want to go, Marcus?
Well, it's well, yeah, I would avoid, if you are perhaps I don't know, Facebook or Spotify or something, you perhaps shouldn't send an email directly from your company email, because then that would trigger the price, I would say. But also you should be aware that nowadays it's not easy to just send off request from an anonymous Gmail address, for example, we see that we have really good track record when we approaching as an expert, domain name expert from DotKeeper, because then if it's held by an investor, they realize that we are serious, that we can provide actually a serious bid, but also that they can't really, trigger the price too high, because we actually know that's what the realistic market value of this domain name is. So that's for sure one thing. And from your side, Sten, you you receive more emails from or more price requests. So
Yes, from the investor side, I never I always price my domain names. So I almost never get into that negotiation dilemma. But I think that in general, if you try to go after a domain name that you really want yourself, that is generally a bad idea, because if you get snapped off, or if you may get emotional, and to avoid that, it's better to let a broker handle the transaction if it's important to you.
Okay, so another question from Lone. Should we buy domain names in all countries where we have trademarks, or more or less?
in general, I would say yes, but it's very
depending on the trademark strategy, I guess.
exactly, and that's why, and then we're going back to the other question. I mean, looking at the positive effects working with, for example, Ava DotKeeper, because when you should really map up your trademark applications, register trademarks with your domain names, and most of all, the strategy you have for the next coming years.
Yeah, the market strategy.
Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean, it's really important, but it's too easy to say, yes, you should have every single domain name where you have a trademark registration. Yeah.
Yeah. And another question from Christy. Is transfer of a domain name about ownership or just the use right?
Well, that's the same thing. There needs to be an ownership change in the so-called WHOIS records, because that is really the definition of an ownership change. And the domain must also be transferred from the current holder's account to the recipient. Yeah. What was the question?
Sometimes we get requests to help sorting domain name acquisitions up, so to say. And one of the most common things we have to sort out is that you have bought a domain name, you have had it transferred to your new registrar, but as Sten mentioned, you haven't transferred the legal ownership, which means that worst case scenario is that the former owner just brings the domain name back because they have actually the legal right. Then of course you can have some other problems if you do that, but just to say that it's several steps in this process that has to be taken care of.
Yeah, and I have a question from Fredrik here. As I'm not experienced in domains, I don't know if this is on the same topic, but I think it has to do with what you just talked about. So from Fredrik, if I have an established business for 10 years plus and trademark registered, and I identify that a domain containing my trademark has been registered, can I take a legal route, or am I always required to purchase the domain that is infringing on my trademark?
No, you don't have to buy it. I would say that's definitely a case for us to assist, to look at like the dispute routes to get the domain name back. So in that case, sorry, what was it, Frederick? Then Frederick should contact us or Ava, and we can help him out to assessing whether it's infringement or not, and then you can take the dispute route.
Mhm.
All right, and then one more action-oriented question again. So it's from Richard. No, it's from Magnus, I see here. My domain name was stolen when time was out for renewal. How can I get it back without paying too much?
Oh, that's a tricky one.
Yeah. Feel sorry for, I feel
Yes.
sorry for Magnus. I don't know why. It feels like a tricky situation.
Yeah. Well, that's a hard one because we see it a lot, and also the headline for this webinar is also the headline for a blog post we posted back in 2014, I think, and it's still one of the most read one that also still get us a lot of leads because this is unfortunately very common that you miss out the renewal and then some drop catch service picks the domain names up, and actually if it's, I mean, that is pretty much that you have to pay up for the domain name to get it back. You can of course look at the case and see if it's possible to, you know, go by the dispute route, but normally I would say it isn't. But still,
I think normally also that well, most domain names do not have a market value. Most domain names are really they have no value except for maybe the registration cost. So if you did not renew it, it might drop and it might become available again for registration. If the domain has value, it may be re-registered and caught by someone else, maybe another business, maybe an investor that wants to resell the domain name. And in that case, unless you have other IP, existing IP protecting it, you're going to have to change your domain name, or you're going to have to pay for it.
All right, so one question from Tristi then. Is it legal to pay a price for the transfer of a domain name? Is this even legal what you're working with?
yes.
We hope so.
You might have gotten more ladies if it was a bit more illegal, but
no, but actually it's some top level domains. I mean country specific top level domains. They don't allow actually trade with domain names.
Is that so?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in some cases, Chris is actually right. It is illegal. Yeah.
So in some cases, you might have better chances with the ladies then.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think we're approaching the wrap up, but I will just look through if I've missed any of the questions or if there are any more questions coming in. You've been very active, I guess, here. And if I missed any of the questions, feel sure that we will get back to you with answers. So everyone will get their answers. And afterwards, we will also send out the video and everything to you. So if you missed anything or you want to listen once again, you will have that one. Let's see here. I think it looks like something is coming in. I can't really see if it does.
While we're waiting, I can just add on, I think it was Magnus that had a question about the taken one. I mean, that's also a reason to use, and it must not be .keeper, but you're most welcome, of course, but use an outsourcing partner for your domain names that guarantee the renewal. an automatic renewal service to your domain names, so you don't. I've been there myself. You have it via a registrar, and you had added your credit card, and the credit card expire, and then you lose your domain name. So yeah, use the automated renewal service.
Very good point. I have some questions here. I just want to ask them quickly before we wrap up. So it's 3 questions. No, 2 questions. What is the difference between an investor and a bad faith user of a domain name? That is the first one. I think Sten will answer that. And then the second one, do squatters normally renew domain names, or is it worthwhile monitoring domain names we want?
Yes. So the first question is what is the difference between an investor in domain names and a squatter? Well, a squatter is targeting a single out specified entity to cash in on their PR and their the work they have put into their brand, and they try to monetize that. But a domain name investor looks one maybe at the more generic side of domain names that are, as things are right now, at least not trademarkable in that way. And they also look at other, more formal traits of the unique name to see if they think it has value. So different kinds of intent, I think you can say.
Yeah, great. And the second question, do they normally renew their domain names?
I think different kinds of squatters have different kinds of strategies, but if they have been doing this for a while and they think that this domain name may get the specific company's attention at one point or another, they are going to renew it, I think.
And I am so curious, since you are in the domain industry, both of you, do you know any squatters? Or are there like hackers, or do you know any of them?
Well, I think that sometimes this is a discussion on discussion forums in the industry, and often it is newcomers who don't really grasp the concept of IP protection, and I think that domain names is a rich get rich quick scheme. So they register something without thinking and knowing. I think that is where the squatters are.
Yeah. So you investors, you stay friends, and the squatters, they can just try to get rich fast, but they
and it
hopefully won't succeed.
No.
All right, I'm going to go into wrapping up mode. If we missed any of your questions, we will approach you after this webinar. So let's see where we have the presentation again. There you should see my presentation, and I will move forward and to the key takeaways then. So from today's learnings, we have learned that domains are infrastructure and the branding vehicles that are probably worth more than a cup of coffee. Actually, today with the society we have today, digital is everything. The second learning is try to not compromise with your choice of domain. So don't give up if a domain name is taken. Just, look it up, everything, what can be done, because the naming is more important than to compromise. The third one is protective registrations can be an effective strategy. You don't really want to give the squatters any reason to believe that you're not on top of things. That is always regarding trademarks and patents and everything. The more you can look like you are a strong player that know your thing, then you will look like you're not someone you want to mess with. The fourth one is that acquisitions can get hairy and consult an expert. Just as Marcus told you before, it can be really handy to have a wingman in these questions that has experience and knows all the pitfalls and also knows how to push the conversation forward without closing the negotiations in the wrong timing, because you want to win the negotiation all the time. All right. So this was all for today's webinar from us. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart. I know that some of you already follows us, but follow DotKeeper on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. And I also have a last message to all of you. As we have said, I work at AVA and Marcus works at DotKeeper, and Sten is a really cool guy connected to DotKeeper as well. Working with investments. We are all on LinkedIn, and we want to think that you can consider us to be your friends in IP. So if you have any questions, anything at all regarding IP, just send us an email, contact us on LinkedIn, whatever. We will do our best to help you move forward. So that is really, consider us to be your friends, because that's what we are. As I said earlier, the recording of this will be sent out tomorrow, also with a handout, so you will get something more. And yeah, I think that was all for today, actually. I hope you enjoyed. I can see that we still have almost everyone attendees still joining us. I'm very happy for that. I'm so thankful that you had so many questions, and well, look forward to meeting you on LinkedIn then. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.